The shuttle doors opened with a soft hiss, and Park stepped onto Station 7 for the first time. She carried only a small bag over her shoulder and wore the simple uniform of the Galactic Coalition training program. Her black hair was tied back neatly, and she looked around the massive hangar with curious eyes. She had dreamed of this moment for years. Earth had only recently made contact with alien life, and she was one of the first humans selected for the officer exchange program. 6 months of training alongside species from across the galaxy. 6 months to prove that humanity belonged among the stars. The hangar was enormous. Ships of all sizes rested on landing pads. Strange machines moved cargo from one place to another, and everywhere looked she saw aliens. Some were tall and covered in blue scales that shimmered under the lights. Others were small and furry with ears bigger than their heads. A few were massive creatures with skin and arms thicker than tree trunks. All of them had stopped what they were doing. All of them were staring at her. Smiled and gave a small wave. "Hello," she said. No one waved back. A few of the smaller aliens actually ran away. A blue-scaled alien approached her carefully. He walked like someone approaching a dangerous animal, each step slow and measured. He held a thin device in his four-fingered hand and kept glancing at it nervously. "You are the human," he said. It was not a question. "Yes, sir. Private First Class Park, reporting for duty." She stood straight and gave a proper salute. The alien flinched at the sudden movement. He took a moment to collect himself before speaking again. "I am Commander. I will be overseeing your training." He looked at his device again. "It says here you're is Earth, a Class 12. Nodded, "That's right." Scales seemed to change color slightly, shifting toward a pale. Would later learn this meant fear. "Class 12 is very high, very dangerous. Your planet has extreme temperature changes, violent weather patterns, predatory life forms, toxic plant life, seismic activity. The atmosphere itself is corrosive." "We call it oxygen," said with a small laugh. "It's actually quite nice once you get used to it." Did not laugh. He made a note on his device. Could not read alien writing, but she imagined it said something like, "Human makes jokes, possibly threatening behavior." "Follow me," said. "I will show you to your quarters." They walked through long corridors filled with more starring aliens. Tried to seem friendly, but nothing she did made them less afraid. She smiled. They backed away. She nodded in greeting. They pressed themselves against walls. One small furry alien actually climbed up a taller companion to get away from her. "They seem nervous," said quietly. "They have read about your species," replied. "The Coalition database has extensive files on Earth and humans. Your biology is concerning to many." "Concerning how?" Stopped walking and turned to face her. His eyes, large and golden, studied her carefully. "Your species evolved on a world that actively tries to kill you, every day, in countless ways, and yet you survived. You became the dominant life form on your planet. Do you understand what that means to the rest of the galaxy?" Thought about it. On Earth, humans were just humans. They went to work. They raised families. They watched television and complained about traffic. They did not think of themselves as remarkable. "I suppose I never thought about it that way," she admitted. "Most species evolved on calm worlds," explained. "Stable climates, gentle environments. We developed intelligence through cooperation and peace. Your species developed intelligence through conflict and survival. You are, by our standards, built for war." They continued walking, considered his words carefully. She had never been in a war. She had trained for combat, yes, but she had joined the military to explore space, not to fight. The idea that aliens saw her as some kind of warrior species was strange and a little sad. Her quarters were small but comfortable. A bed, a desk, a window looking out at the stars, and already waiting inside was her new roommate. The alien was small, barely reaching his waist. She was covered in soft brown fur, with enormous ears that twitched constantly. Her eyes were wide and wet, like a frightened rabbit. She pressed herself into the corner of the room as entered. "This is," said. She will be your bunkmate for the duration of the program." Made a tiny squeaking sound. She was shaking. "Hello," said gently. She crouched down to seem less tall. "It's nice to meet you." Squeaked again, but did not respond with words. Left them alone and spent the next hour trying to make her roommate comfortable. She unpacked her bag slowly, showing each item. Clothes, a book, a small photograph of her family back on Earth, a stuffed animal her younger sister had given her before she left. "This is," said, holding up the small plush dog. "My sister said he would keep me company." His ears twitched, her eyes focused on the stuffed toy. "It is soft?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Very soft. Would you like to hold him?" Placed the stuffed animal on the floor between them and stepped back. For a long moment did not move. Then slowly, she crept forward and touched the toy with one small paw. Her ears relaxed slightly. "Soft," she confirmed. "You can borrow him tonight if you want," offered. "I think he would like to make a new friend." Looked up at her with something other than fear for the first time. It was not quite trust, not yet, but it was a start. "You are strange," said. "The files say humans are dangerous, but you carry soft things and offer them to strangers." Smiled. "I think you'll find that humans are full of surprises." That night lay in her bed listening to the soft breathing of her roommate across the room. Had fallen asleep holding the stuffed dog, her large ears folded peacefully. Outside the window, unfamiliar stars shone in an unfamiliar sky. Thought about home, about her parents and her sister, about the small apartment in Seoul where she had grown up, about all the billions of humans on Earth who had no idea that the galaxy thought they were monsters. She was not a monster. She was just a young woman who wanted to see the universe and make some friends along the way. Tomorrow, training would begin. Tomorrow, she would meet the rest of her unit. Tomorrow, she would start proving that humans were more than their reputation. Closed her eyes and dreamed of home. 2 weeks passed on Station 7 and began to find her place among the alien soldiers. Her unit, Training Unit 77, was a mix of different species learning to work together. They trained every day, ate meals together, and slowly began to act like a team. Had become's closest friend. The small still jumped at sudden noises and kept her distance during combat drills, but she no longer ran away when entered a room. She had even returned the stuffed dog, though noticed she sometimes looked at it with longing. The other members of Unit 77 were learning to accept the human too, though fear still lived in their eyes. One of the massive skinned aliens had seen on her first day. He stood nearly 3 meters tall and weighed more than a small car. His arms could crush metal. His voice was deep like thunder. And yet, he kept a respectful distance from the human girl who barely reached his chest. "I have heard stories," told the others one evening at dinner. "Humans can run for many hours without stopping. They chase prey until it collapses from exhaustion. They call it persistence hunting." A blue-scaled-like commander leaned in with interest. He was training to be a medic and found human biology fascinating. "Their wounds heal on their own," he added. "Broken bones repair themselves. Cut skin grows back together. It takes time, but they regenerate without medical intervention." "That is impossible," said a young named. "No species heals like that." "Humans do," insisted. "I read the medical files. They also have an immune system that actively hunts and destroys infections. Their bodies are at constant war, even when they are healthy." Sat at the end of the table, eating her meal and pretending not to hear. She had grown used to these conversations. The aliens talked about humans like they were reading from a nature documentary about dangerous predators. It was strange but not unkind. They were curious, not cruel. "Is it true?" asked quietly, looking up at. "Your body heals itself." Held up her hand. There was a small scar on her palm, a thin white line. "I got this when I was 8 years old. I fell off my bicycle and cut my hand on a rock. It bled a lot, but my mother cleaned it and wrapped it in bandages. A few weeks later, it was healed." The alien stared at the scar like it was evidence of some incredible power. "A few weeks," whispered. "For most species, such a wound would require medical treatment, surgery, regeneration therapy. It would take months." Shrugged. "Human bodies are pretty good at fixing themselves. We do need doctors for serious injuries, though. We're not invincible." But the look in their eyes told her they did not quite believe that last part. Training continued. Unit 77 practiced tactical movements, learned to operate coalition equipment, and studied the rules of engagement for peacekeeping operations. Found most of it straightforward. The technology was advanced, but the basic concepts were similar to what she had learned on Earth. The physical training was where things became complicated. Coalition species were not built for sustained physical activity. They were fast but tired quickly. They were strong but slow. They had excellent reflexes but poor endurance. Their training exercises were designed around these limitations, with frequent rest periods and careful attention to not pushing too hard. Finished most exercises while the others were still halfway through. She tried to slow down to match their pace, but her body simply wanted to move. One day, during an endurance run, instructor stopped the entire unit to watch her. Was an old soldier with scars covering his hide. He had fought in 3 wars and trained thousands of recruits. He was not easily impressed, but as jogged past the rest of the unit for the 3rd time, he held up his hand to stop her. "Human," he said, "how are you not tired?" Was breathing harder now, but she was far from exhausted. "This is a comfortable pace," she said. "On Earth, I would run twice this distance for morning exercise." Looked at the other recruits. Was bent over, hands on his knees, gasping for air. Had stopped running entirely and was sitting on the ground. Even usually the most composed species, looked strained. "Twice this distance," repeated, "every morning. Sometimes more on weekends." The old shook his head slowly. "The files do not lie. Your species is built for endurance, for pursuit, for outlasting." Did not know what to say. On Earth, she was considered average. She was not an athlete or a special forces soldier. She was just a regular person who exercised regularly and tried to stay healthy. But here, among the stars, regular was extraordinary. The other recruits looked at her differently after that day. Not with more fear exactly, but with a kind of awe. She was not just dangerous because she came from a dangerous world. She was dangerous because her body was a weapon, even when she did nothing at all. That evening, sat alone in the observation deck, looking out at the stars. She missed home more than ever. On Earth, she was just the girl who liked sweet pastries and romantic movies, the girl who cried at sad songs and laughed at silly jokes, the girl who was afraid of spiders and hated waking up early. Here she was the human, a representative of a species the galaxy feared. Found her there an hour later. The small climbed onto the bench beside her and sat quietly for a while. "You are sad," observed. "A little," admitted. "The others are afraid of you because you are strong, but I have watched you for 2 weeks." Ears twitched thoughtfully. "You are gentle with small things. You share your food. You do not use your strength to hurt." Smiled sadly. "On Earth, we have a saying, with great power comes great responsibility. It means that if you are strong, you should protect the weak, not hurt them." Considered this. "That is a good saying. I think I like humans." It was a small thing, just a few words from a tiny alien, but it meant more to than any of the fearful stares or whispered rumors. Tomorrow would bring more training, more exercises that reminded everyone how different she was, but tonight she had a friend who saw her as more than a monster. That was enough. The morning of the hand-to-hand combat training arrived like any other day. The recruits of Unit 77 gathered in the large training hall, standing in neat rows as instructor walked before them. The old moved slowly, his body showing the weight of many years and many battles. "Today," announced his deep voice echoing through the hall, "we practice basic self-protection. This is not about winning fights. This is about survival. If you are attacked, your goal is simple: create distance, call for help, stay alive." The recruits nodded. This was standard coalition training. Violence was always the last option, and running away was considered the choice in most situations. Demonstrated the basic technique. It was simple. If someone grabbed you, you pushed them gently and stepped to the side. Then you ran in the opposite direction while calling for assistance. No strikes, no aggression, just escape. The aliens practiced in pairs, worked with another, both of them squeaking nervously as they pretended to push each other. Partnered with a fellow, their massive bodies moving slowly and carefully. Even, usually graceful, seemed awkward as he practiced the sidestep motion. Stood alone at the edge of the group. No one had volunteered to be her partner. Noticed this and walked toward her. The other recruits stopped their practice to watch. There was a heaviness in the air, a sense that something important was about to happen. "Human," said, "you will demonstrate with me. Show us how your species handles basic self-protection." Hesitated. She looked around at the watching aliens, at their wide eyes and nervous expressions. "Sir, I should mention that Earth training is a bit different from coalition training." "Different how?" We do not focus on escape. We focus on stopping the threat." Tilted his massive head. "Stopping the threat, you mean hurting the attacker?" "If necessary, yes." A murmur went through the crowd. The idea of intentionally hurting someone during a defensive situation was foreign to most coalition species. It was considered barbaric, uncivilized. However, seemed intrigued. "Show me," he said. "I will attack you. You respond as you were trained on Earth, basic self-protection." Took a deep breath. She positioned herself in front of the massive, feeling very small, was nearly twice her height and many times her weight. On Earth, fighting someone this big would be considered suicidal. But she had been trained. "Ready?" asked. Nodded. Lunged forward. He was slow by human standards, his large body not designed for quick movements. His arms reached out to grab her shoulders, a simple restraining hold. Moved. Her left hand shot up and redirected his arm, pushing it to the side. Her right hand grabbed his wrist and twisted, using his own momentum against him. Her left leg swept behind his knee. Her elbow drove into his chest, not hard enough to injure, but hard enough to push the air from his lungs. In less than 2 seconds, instructor was on the ground. Stood over him in a control position, one hand still holding his arm, her knee gently pressing against his back. She could have broken his arm. She could have struck his head. She could have done many things that would have caused serious harm. Instead, she held him carefully, like a teacher demonstrating a technique. The training hall was completely silent. Lay on the ground, his massive chest heaving as he tried to breathe. His eyes were wide with shock. In his entire life, across 3 wars and countless battles, he had never been defeated so quickly. Released him immediately and stepped back. "I am so sorry," she said, her face red with embarrassment. "Are you hurt? I tried to be gentle. That was the basic version. I held back." Slowly pushed himself up from the ground. He sat there for a moment, staring at the small human who had just defeated him without any visible effort. "Held back," he repeated quietly. "Yes, sir. On Earth, basic self-protection includes strikes to vulnerable areas and techniques to disable attackers. What I showed was very gentle compared to full training." The silence continued. Had fainted. 2 medics were rushing to revive her. Had sat down heavily, his powerful legs apparently unable to support him. Even Commander, who had been watching from the observation room, had his mouth hanging open. was the first to speak. She took down instructor in 2 seconds, without weapons. She said it was basic, another recruit whispered. What is advanced? Wished she could disappear. This was exactly what she had been afraid of. All the progress she had made, all the friendships she had been building, destroyed in a moment of trained reflex. But surprised her. The old climbed to his feet and stood before the human. He was breathing heavily, and there would probably be bruises on his chest and arm tomorrow. But he was not angry. Instead, he looked at with something that resembled respect. All my life, said slowly, I thought they were the strongest warriors in the galaxy. We are large, we are powerful, we have won many wars. He paused. I was wrong. He turned to face the assembled recruits. What you just witnessed was a lesson, not in technique but in truth. The humans evolved on a world where survival required combat, not running, not hiding, fighting. They have had thousands of years to perfect the art of defeating enemies with their bare hands. He looked back and this small female, barely grown by our standards, holds back because she does not want to hurt us. Did not know what to say. She had expected anger or fear. She had not expected understanding. Placed his massive hand on her shoulder the first time any had voluntarily touched her. You are not a monster, human. You are a warrior, and warriors can choose when to fight and when to show mercy. He squeezed gently. Today, you showed mercy to an old soldier who underestimated you. I will not make that mistake again. Had been revived and was staring with enormous eyes. But for the first time, the fear in those eyes was mixed with something else. Wonder. That evening, sat alone in her quarters, replaying the moment in her mind. She had revealed what humans could do. She had shown them the violence that lived in her training, in her reflexes, in her very nature. And they had not rejected her. Had called her a warrior. The recruits looked at her differently now, but not with the fear she expected. They looked at her like they were seeing her for the first time. Maybe being a was not something to hide. Maybe it was something to share, carefully and gently, with those brave enough to understand. Knocked on her door later that night. The small entered slowly, still nervous but determined. She said, "Will you teach me?" "Teach you what?" "To be strong like you." Ears drooped. "I am small and weak. Everything frightens me, but you are kind and gentle and you are also powerful. I want to learn how to be both." Smiled. It was the best thing anyone had said to her since she arrived on the station. "I would be honored," she replied. "We start tomorrow." News of the training incident spread quickly through Station 7. Within a day, everyone had heard about the human who defeated the legendary instructor in 2 seconds. Within a week, scientists and military observers began arriving from across the coalition to study found herself at the center of attention she never wanted. Every day brought new tests, new questions, new observers taking notes on everything she did. She tried to be patient, remembering that she was representing all of humanity, but the constant examination was exhausting. "We would like to measure your endurance," a scientist named said one morning. "Please run on this machine until you cannot continue." Stepped onto the running machine. It was similar to treadmills on Earth but more advanced, adjusting its speed automatically and monitoring her vital signs. She began at a slow jog. An hour passed, and his assistants watched with growing disbelief as continued running. Her breathing was heavier now, and sweat covered her skin, but she showed no signs of stopping. 2 hours passed. One of the observers had to leave the room because the anxiety of watching was affecting his health. Noticed and felt bad about it, but she did not know how to slow down without being dishonest about human capabilities. 3 hours passed. Finally stepped off the machine, not because she could not continue but because she was getting bored. "Is that enough data?" she asked. Was speechless. His translator device crackled as it tried to find words. Finally, he managed to ask, "How much longer could you have continued?" Thought about it honestly. Maybe another hour at that pace. If I slowed down, several more hours. Humans are not the fastest species, but we are built for distance. Made notes with shaking hands. Your ancestors hunted by chasing prey until it collapsed from exhaustion, he said. The files described this, but I did not truly understand until now. The environmental tolerance tests came next. Submerged her hand in ice water for 10 minutes while monitors tracked her response. The aliens watching seemed ready to call for emergency medical help the entire time. It is cold, admitted, but not painful. Actually, it feels kind of nice. Nice? A scientist squeaked. That temperature would cause permanent damage to most species within seconds. Removed her hand and wiggled her fingers. They were red but perfectly functional. Humans evolved in all kinds of environments. Hot deserts, frozen mountains, tropical jungles. Our bodies learned to adapt. They tested her heat tolerance next, placing her in a room that would cause most coalition species to suffer heat stroke. Found it warm but manageable, similar to a summer day in Seoul. This is pleasant, she said. Could I have something to drink, though? Staying hydrated is important. The observers stared at her like she was performing miracles. But it was the medical demonstration that truly shocked them. During lunch preparation one day, accidentally cut her finger while slicing vegetables. It was a small cut, barely worth mentioning by human standards. A few drops of blood, a quick rinse under water, and a simple bandage. The coalition medics who witnessed this nearly declared a medical emergency. "You are bleeding," said, his scales turning pale with concern. "You require immediate treatment." "It is just a small cut," replied, wrapping her finger in a cloth napkin. "It will stop bleeding in a minute and heal on its own in a few days." Heal on its own was already reaching for his medical equipment. "The wound is open. Infection could enter. The tissue could die. You need regeneration therapy immediately." Gently stopped him. "I promise I am fine. Human blood clots naturally. Our immune system fights infection constantly, and our skin grows back together without any special treatment." She smiled reassuringly. "I have had hundreds of cuts like this in my life. They always heal." Looked at her finger like he was witnessing something impossible. "Your species is not just strong," he said quietly. "You are designed to survive damage, to take wounds and keep functioning, to be hurt and recover." I guess that is one way to describe it. That evening, a different kind of observation occurred, one that did not expect. She was sitting by the window in the common room, looking at the stars and thinking about home. The small photograph of her family was in her hands, her parents smiling at the camera, her little sister making a silly face, the apartment building in the background where she had grown up. She did not realize she was crying until appeared beside her. The small climbed onto the seat next to her. "You are leaking water from your eyes. Are you damaged?" Laughed softly and wiped her tears. "No, I am just homesick. I miss my family. I miss Earth. Everything here is so different, and sometimes I feel very alone." Was quiet for a moment. Then she asked a question that caught off guard. "You could hurt everyone on this station. You are stronger than faster than you can survive things that would kill the rest of us." Ears twitched nervously. "Why do you not take what you want? Why do you follow orders from species weaker than you?" It was a question had never considered. On Earth, the strong protecting the weak was considered normal. It was taught in schools, shown in movies, praised in stories. The idea of using strength to dominate others was seen as wrong. But looking at, realized that this was not universal. In a galaxy where most species ran from danger, the concept of powerful beings choosing to be gentle was almost unimaginable. "My grandmother was a survivor," said slowly. "When she was young, there was a terrible war in our country. She lost her home, her family, everything she knew. She walked for weeks through dangerous lands to reach safety. She rebuilt her life from nothing." Listened with wide eyes. She used to tell me that anyone can destroy. It takes no skill to break things or hurt people, but building something, protecting something, helping others when you could just as easily harm them, that takes true strength. Touched the photograph gently. She said the measure of a person is not what they could do, but what they choose to do. Your grandmother sounds very wise. She was, smiled at the memory. She also made the best noodle soup in our neighborhood. I miss that too. Reached out with one small paw and touched hand. It was the first time she had voluntarily touched the human. Her fur was soft and warm. I was wrong to fear you, said. You are not a monster. You are just a person who is very far from home and very sad. Felt more tears threatening to fall, but these were different. These were tears of gratitude. Thank you. I am your friend now, they declared. Friends do not let friends be sad alone. My people learned this thousands of years ago. She paused. Also, I would like to try this noodle soup when we visit Earth someday. Laughed through her tears. It is a deal. The observers watching from the corridor made notes about the human's emotional display. They wrote about tears and vulnerability and the surprising gentleness of a. But they completely missed the most important observation of all. The human had made a true friend, and in doing so, she had proven that strength and kindness could exist in the same heart. 6 months passed faster than expected. The days of training blended together into weeks, and the weeks into months. She learned coalition tactics and technology. She taught human techniques to those brave enough to learn. And slowly, quietly, Unit 77 became something none of them had expected. They became a family. Had transformed from a frightened creature into a confident scout. Her large ears could detect sounds that other species missed, and with encouragement, she had learned to use this gift instead of hiding from it. She still slept with the stuffed dog sometimes, but now it was a comfort, not a crutch. Had humbled himself to learn from a being half his size. The massive practiced human movement techniques every morning, his powerful body learning to be quick instead of just strong. He would never be as fast as, but he was faster than any in coalition history. Had combined human medical knowledge with coalition technology. His treatments were now more effective, faster, and could keep injured soldiers fighting when they would have previously been evacuated. He called it battlefield medicine and wrote papers about it that were read across the galaxy. Even instructor had changed. The old warrior had begun incorporating human combat philosophy into his training, not the violence but the mentality, the understanding that sometimes you had to fight, not to hurt, but to protect. The final test came on a cold morning in the 6th month. Unit 77 stood in the simulation chamber, facing a scenario that was supposed to be impossible. An enemy force twice their size had taken a coalition medical station. Hostages were being held inside. The clock was ticking. By traditional coalition standards, the correct answer was to wait for reinforcements, call for specialists, minimize risk, accept that some hostages might be lost. Commander stood in the observation room, watching with other senior officers. Among them were admirals and generals from across the coalition, gathered to see what the human exchange program had produced. Request permission to try something different. His voice came through the communication system. I want to use the Earth approach. Hesitated. He had watched this human for 6 months. He had seen her kindness and her capability. He had learned to trust her judgment even when it frightened him. Permission granted, he said. What happened next would be studied in military academies for generations. Did not lead a charge. She did not fight alone. Instead, she commanded her unit like a conductor leading an orchestra. Moved first, her sensitive ears mapping the enemy positions from a safe distance. She relayed the information in quiet whispers that only the unit could hear. 4 guards at the main entrance, 2 on the roof. The hostages are in the central room. Said, can you draw their attention to the main entrance? The grinned. He was not going to fight, just make noise. He stepped out of cover and bellowed a challenge in his native language, pounding his chest like a drum. Every guard turned toward the sound. "Prepare medical supplies. We will need them after." The nodded, and his equipment. He had learned that human tactics often involved taking risks that required immediate medical attention afterward. It was terrifying, but it worked. Moved like a shadow through the side corridors. She had taught her unit this technique, but none could match her speed. In moments, she was inside the building, neutralizing guards with quiet efficiency. Not killing, just disabling. Each enemy fell silently, unconscious before they knew what had happened. "Roof guards are turning," reported. "They see they are aiming weapons." "Tell him to move," ordered. "Now." Ducked behind cover just as energy weapons fired at where he had been standing. The distraction was complete. No one was watching the side doors anymore. "Unit 77, move in. Follow the pattern we practiced." They moved together, covering each other like they had trained, scouted ahead, provided cover, stayed in the middle, ready to treat any injuries, and cleared the path before them, her human reflexes making the difference between success and failure. The hostages were freed in under 4 minutes. When the simulation ended, the observation room was silent. The admirals and generals stared at the tactical display, reviewing what they had just witnessed. A unit of mixed species, led by a human, had accomplished what no coalition force had done before. "That was not luck," Admiral finally said. He was an old with white scales and tired eyes. "That was coordination. That was trust. That was a team that knew each other completely." Stepped forward. They trained together for 6 months. They learned from each other. The human did not make them fight like humans. She helped them fight as themselves together. Admiral turned to look at the unit through the observation window. They were celebrating now, hugging and cheering. The tiny was perched on the shoulder. The medic was checking everyone for injuries out of habit, and the human stood in the center, smiling with tears in her eyes. "The exchange program was supposed to teach aliens about humans," said slowly, "but perhaps it has taught us something more important." "And what is that, Admiral?" "That strength is not about one species being better than another. It is about different strengths working together." He paused. "The humans call this synergy. Perhaps they have more to teach us than we realized." The celebration lasted long into the night. There were speeches and medals and formal recognition of what Unit 77 had accomplished. But the real celebration happened later, in the common room where the unit gathered alone. Looked around at the friends she had made, who had gone from terrified prey creature to brave scout, who had learned that size was not the same as strength, who had combined 2 worlds of medicine into something new, and all the others who had learned to see beyond fear. "I leave for Earth tomorrow," said quietly. The words hurt more than she expected. The room fell silent. Spoke first. The old had joined the celebration, having become something like an uncle to the unit. "You changed us, human. You showed us that are not monsters. You proved that power and kindness can exist together." "What will you tell them about us?" asked, her ears drooping sadly. "When you return to your world?" Thought about the question carefully. She thought about all the fear she had faced when she arrived, all the whispers and stares and nervous retreats, and she thought about how that fear had transformed into understanding, and understanding into friendship, and friendship into love. "I will tell them that the galaxy is full of wonderful people," she said. "Different shapes, different sizes, different strengths, but all of them are capable of courage and kindness and growth. I will tell them that we are not alone in the universe." She smiled through her tears. "And I will tell them that the galaxy is full of people worth protecting." Climbed onto the chair beside her and pressed her furry face against his arm. "You will come back." "I promise." Years later, when Earth formally joined the Galactic Coalition, Ambassador Park stood at the signing ceremony. Behind her were representatives from 100 different species. Beside her were the friends she had made on Station 7, now senior officers in a changed military. The training methods she developed became standard across the coalition. The philosophy she shared, of strength used for protection rather than dominance, spread to every corner of the galaxy, and the friendship between humans and other species grew stronger with each passing year. But those who knew the true story always remembered it differently. They remembered a young woman from a dangerous world who scared everyone with her basic self-defense, and then taught them that the strongest thing a warrior can do is choose to be kind.